Get me a goddamn drink, Blackie, and hurry it up. The words didn't just cut through the polite murmur of the celestial gala. They ripped the air open, a jagged, ugly tear in a tapestry of silk and champagne. They were crude, sloppy, and aimed like a dart straight at the woman in the simple midnight blue gown. A wave of snickering followed, thin and sharp, bouncing off the cavernous, starlit ceiling of the Starlight Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom. Aria Vance didn't even blink. She stood near a towering ice sculpture of a swan, the epitome of stillness in a sea of restless ambition. No cascade of diamonds dripped from her neck, no gaudy logos screamed her worth. Her power was a quieter thing, a gravity that bent the world around her without needing to announce itself. She brought her phone to her ear, her gaze, cool and analytical, locking on to the man who had just spoken. Julian Devereaux. Behind him, his mother, Eleonora, the family's icy matriarch, watched with an expression of bored approval, her pearl choker gleaming like a row of polished teeth. A small court of men in identical, ridiculously expensive tuxedos grinned, their faces flushed with privilege and too much vintage scotch. One of them, emboldened by Julian's audacity, actually snapped his fingers in her direction, a gesture one might use for a disobedient dog. But before we dive deeper into this abyss, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments below. And if you believe, deep in your bones, that dignity is not a privilege but a right, then smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. These stories aren't just stories, they're a wake-up call, and I'm damn glad you're here to answer it. Now, back to the storm brewing in Ethelberg. Aria's voice into her phone was a whisper, yet it held the weight of an earthquake. It's happening, Isabel. Execute contingency scythe. Cancel the $1.2 billion merger. The laughter around the Devereaux didn't stop, but it faltered, losing its rhythm. They hadn't heard the words, of course, but they saw the shift in her posture, the absolute, unshakable certainty in her eyes. It was the calm of a master strategist who wasn't being cornered, but was instead closing the final door of a trap she had set weeks ago. "Which catering service are you with, sweetheart?" Julian called out, his voice slurring slightly as he lifted his glass. "If you're quick on your feet, we might just leave you a generous tip." His mother, Eleonora, leaned in, her voice dripping with condescending poison. "Darling, you seem confused. This area is for the investors, the real players. The help is supposed to stay by the service entrance." The ballroom's string quartet didn't miss a note, but the atmosphere curdled. 100 conversations paused. Eyes, sharp and hungry for drama, began to turn. Near the stage, a young reporter named Chloe Chang, her mind as sharp as the crease in her blazer, slid her phone from her clutch. She didn't raise it, obviously. Instead, she angled it just so, the lens of her camera catching the entire ugly spectacle over the rim of a crystal water goblet. The little red light was on. She was live. Aria's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was a sliver of ice, a warning. She'd seen this pathetic display 1,000 times before. Entitlement masquerading as authority. At 28, fresh out of business school with a plan that would revolutionize the tech industry, she'd been physically escorted from a boardroom she was meant to be leading because a security guard decided, based on nothing but his own prejudice, that she couldn't possibly be the Mr. Vance on his list. At 34, while closing a multinational acquisition in Tokyo, the opposing counsel had mistaken her for her own translator for the first 20 minutes of the negotiation. She had let him, and then, in flawless Japanese, she had systematically dismantled his entire legal position, leaving him speechless and humiliated. Julian's voice boomed again, louder this time, feeding on the attention. Security, we have a trespasser here. A uniformed guard near the grand entrance looked up, his expression a mixture of duty and confusion. The Devereux matriarch, Eleonora, a woman whose pearl necklace was probably worth more than the guard's house, took a predatory step forward. With a flick of her wrist, she snatched the event pass from where it was clipped to Arya's gown. The sound of the paper tearing was shockingly loud, a violent rip that seemed to silence the violins in the corner. Get her out of my sight. Arya didn't move a muscle. Her phone remained pressed to her ear. Priority Alpha, Isabel, she repeated, her voice as smooth as polished stone. Across the ballroom, Chloe Chang's hand tightened on her phone. The view count on her live stream was skyrocketing. She didn't know the woman in the midnight blue dress, but she recognized the look in her eyes. It was the look of a person who didn't need to shout to command an army. The look of someone who, in the next few minutes, was about to burn the entire gilded room to the ground. The chandeliers, which had seemed so warm and inviting moments before, now cast a cold, forensic light on the scene, sharpening the edges of every cruel glance, every judgmental stare. The pack of tuxedoed hyenas around Julian hadn't moved, but their voices carried, thick with the arrogance of men who had never been told no. Which table hired you to pour drinks? Julian pressed, his voice a hammer looking for a nail. Eleonora added, her tone suggesting Arya was a particularly stubborn stain on her marble floor. You're holding up the flow of the evening. People are waiting to be served. Arya's gaze was a physical force, holding them in place. She shifted her weight, a subtle, deliberate movement, one hand loose at her side, the other holding the phone to her ear like a scepter. Near the stage, Chloe Chang adjusted her angle, her camera lens now perfectly framed between two half-empty champagne flutes. The red dot was a promise. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was bearing witness. A young waiter, Leo, navigating the floor with a tray of appetizers, slowed his pace, his eyes darting between Arya and the cluster of overfed accusers. He didn't say a word, but a muscle in his jaw clenched. He was just a kid, probably working 2 jobs to get through college, but in that moment, he saw something no one else was admitting: a public execution. He kept moving, but his shoulders were a little straighter. Eleonora, sensing a wavering in the security guard's resolve, closed the distance. The heels of her designer pumps clicked against the floor like the counting of a clock. Sweetheart, this gala is for investors who are shaping the future of global commerce, people who actually matter. She flicked her gaze over to the security guard, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a silver earpiece. Escort her out. Now. The guard hesitated. It was a tiny pause, a fractional beat, but Arya saw it, catalogued it, and understood it completely. At 34, she had watched a hotel concierge in Zurich pause just like that before informing her, with false regret, that the presidential suite she had booked and paid for 6 months in advance was suddenly unavailable. That pause was the space between protocol and prejudice, the moment where a person had to choose which master they served. Finally, the guard started his slow, cautious walk toward her. Ma'am, I'm going to have to see your credentials. They're gone, Arya said evenly, her voice carrying a note of clinical detachment. She nodded toward the shredded remains of her pass, clutched in Eleonora's perfectly manicured hand like a trophy scalp. Chloe Chang's eyebrows shot up. She subtly zoomed in, capturing the image of the matriarch holding the torn paper. This was gold. The comments on her live stream were exploding. Eleonora smirked, a cruel, triumphant twist of her lips. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Arya lowered the phone just an inch from her mouth, her voice now audible to those closest to her. You already chose the hard way. Then she brought it back to her ear. Isabel, move the capital. All of it. Reroute to Orion Dynamics. Don't wait for my signature. My word is the trigger. Go. A ripple of shock, quiet but potent, spread through the bystanders. A man in a tailored gray suit turned to his wife, his whisper just loud enough to be heard. Did she just say Orion Dynamics? His wife's eyes widened in understanding. Orion was the Devereaux's biggest, most hated rival. Julian scoffed, a desperate cracking sound. Is this some kind of stunt? You think we're going to fall for a pathetic bluff like that? Aria's gaze was unwavering. It's not a bluff, it's a transaction. Chloe Chang, now feeling the surge of journalistic adrenaline, took a step forward. Her voice was careful but clear and amplified by the microphone on her phone. For the record, she was invited. I saw her name on the primary investor list myself this afternoon. Aria Vance. The name hung in the air for a moment, unrecognized by the Devereaux, who only dealt in legacies, not in legends forged in the fires of modern disruption. Julian laughed, a sharp, ugly bark. You must have misread it. I didn't, Chloe replied, holding her phone a little higher, a silent declaration. And I'm not the only one who saw it. From somewhere behind the circle, another voice joined the fray. It was Leo, the young catering staffer, holding a tray of sparkling water like a shield. She's telling the truth. I saw the name when I was setting the main table. Vance, table 1. His words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a battering ram. Eleonora's perfectly constructed smirk faltered, just for a breath. A tiny crack appeared in her armor of absolute certainty. Aria saw it. Everyone saw it. The live stream saw it. She let the silence stretch, letting the weight of their mistake press down on them. Then she spoke into her phone again, her voice a death knell. Isabel, release the Phoenix Protocol. The security guard froze in his tracks. He had no idea what the Phoenix Protocol was, but he could feel in his gut that it was not going to end well for the people who had summoned him. The air in the ballroom was no longer just tense. It was heavy, charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. The music from the string quartet had faded into a distant, irrelevant memory, a soundtrack from another time, another world, that had existed only 15 minutes ago. Eleonora, desperate to regain control, stepped closer, her expensive perfume a sharp, chemical scent in the air. Her voice was louder now, a performance for the nearby tables. People like you always try to sneak into places where you don't belong. It's a tale as old as time. Julian, taking his cue from his mother, plucked a fresh event pass from his own pocket, someone else's, a guest he'd greeted at the door, and held it out with mocking pity. Here, maybe this one will help you with the little story you're trying to sell. Then, with a theatrical slowness, he tore it in two, letting the pieces flutter to the polished marble floor like toxic confetti. A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe Chang was already repositioning, circling like a shark to capture the blatant act of aggression. Her phone was steady, a silent, unblinking eye recording every detail for the thousands of people now watching online. The matriarch turned back to the security guard, her patience gone. She's stalling for attention. I order you to remove her. Now! The guard moved forward, his duty warring with his instinct. Aria held her ground, a solitary island against a tide of ignorance. On what grounds? Fraud, Julian answered instantly, the word snapping from his lips. She's impersonating someone of importance. She's attempting to fraudulently insert herself into a $1.2 billion transaction. That number, $1.2 billion, sucked the remaining air out of the room. Several guests at nearby tables stopped their conversations entirely. One of them, a man in a deep navy suit, leaned toward his companion. That's the exact size of the Devereaux-Vance Meridian deal. Aria's lips tightened. Not with anger, but with chilling precision. She lowered her phone just enough for the entire room to hear her next word. Was. Eleonora's eyes narrowed. What did you say? Arya brought the phone back to her ear, ignoring the question. Confirm full capital withdrawal, Isabel. Redirect all assets to the Orion Dynamics holding account. Notify both legal teams that the Devereaux merger is terminated, effective immediately, for breach of conduct. Across the room, someone audibly choked on their champagne. Julian laughed again, but this time it was a ragged, desperate sound teetering on the edge of hysteria. You can't redirect a damn thing. You are a nobody here. From the back of the growing crowd, Leo the caterer spoke up again, his voice stronger now, buoyed by the righteousness of the moment. She's not a nobody. You don't get to cancel a $1.2 billion deal unless you're the one who owns it. Eleonora whipped her head around, her face a mask of fury. Stay out of this, boy. Too late, Chloe cut in, her reporter's voice gaining a sharp, professional edge. You made it everyone's business the moment you laid hands on her and tore up her pass in front of 200 people and a live camera. The security guard stopped, now a mere 2 steps from Arya, his eyes darting between the entitled accusers and the growing mob of onlookers. A dozen phones were now raised openly, their red recording lights blinking like a swarm of small, defiant fireflies. Arya's voice remained low, measured, a surgeon's scalpel. One last chance. Are you absolutely certain you want me removed from this event? Eleonora didn't hesitate. Her pride was a fortress that admitted no possibility of error. Absolutely, she nodded curtly at the guard. Do your job. The guard took another hesitant step. And that's when Arya moved, not backward in retreat, but forward, one single deliberate step, closing the space between herself and the pack that had been circling her like wolves. The sheer, unexpected confidence of the move made Eleonora flinch, a tiny, involuntary retreat that was visible to every single person watching. Arya spoke, her voice still quiet, yet every word echoed with the force of a judgment being read aloud in a silent courtroom. You just told the wrong woman she doesn't belong in the room she paid for. The storm had not just broken, it had become a hurricane. The ballroom wasn't just buzzing anymore, it was vibrating, humming with a dangerous, unstable energy. Every glance, every whispered word was a current, feeding a feedback loop that was about to arc and blow every fuse in the building. Arya held her phone steady, her eyes locked on the matriarchs, a predator that had finally tired of playing with its food. Proceed to Phase 3, Isabel, she said into the receiver. On the other end, Isabel's crisp, calm voice was a weapon in its own right. Understood. Legal is on the line with the SEC compliance officer. Capital transfer is in its final stage. It's irreversible. Julian scoffed, a brittle, fragile sound now. Phase 3? What is this? Some kind of pathetic movie? Arya's gaze slid to him, pinning him in place. For the first time, she addressed him directly. Not a movie, an extinction-level event. The words weren't a punch. They were a verdict, all weight and finality. From the side of the room, Chloe Chang spoke again, her voice narrating the drama for her online audience. If she's bluffing, I have to ask, Mr. Devereaux, why do you suddenly look like you're about to be physically ill? Her camera was angled perfectly, capturing Julian's sweat-sheened brow and Eleonora's rigid posture in the same frame. The matriarch shot back, her voice shrill. This woman is a lunatic, trying to humiliate my family at a public event. No, Arya corrected softly, her voice a devastating counterpoint. I'm not humiliating you. I'm just holding up a mirror and letting your own actions do the work for me. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, his hand hovering near his radio but never touching it. He'd seen plenty of stunts at these high-profile galas, protesters, gate-crashers, jilted lovers. But this was different. This wasn't chaos. This was a controlled demolition. Near the ice sculpture, Leo, the caterer, whispered to another server, "Look at her. She's in complete control. She hasn't moved an inch unless she wanted to. They're the ones who are trapped." Isabel's voice returned in Arya's ear. "Corporate has officially flagged the Devereaux family's entire portfolio for breach of good faith in all negotiations, past and present. Do you want me to loop in the Orion Dynamics acquisitions team now?" Arya's eyes swept the room, taking in the sea of phones, the widening eyes, the dawning horror on the faces of the Devereaux' allies. "Yes," she said. "Make it a conference call, and make it loud." Julian's laugh was a hollow, desperate rattle. "Even if you had that kind of power, no one, and I mean no one, cancels a billion-dollar deal in the middle of a party. That is not how the world works." "That is exactly how my world works," Arya stated, the words landing like blows. The matriarch stepped in again, her voice laced with the final, desperate card every bully plays. "Do you have any idea who you are speaking to?" "Yes," Arya replied, and this time a real, cold smile touched her lips. "The question is, Eleonora, do you?" That landed. It landed not just with the Devereaux, but with the entire ring of onlookers who were now rapidly piecing together the horrifying, glorious truth. Chloe Chang took a small, audible breath, her reporter's instincts screaming. "I think we're all about to find out." The guard had given up all pretense of action. He was caught between a direct order from a powerful family and the bone-deep certainty that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. Arya finally lowered her phone. Her voice, though still calm, now carried an edge of finality, like the moment before a guillotine is released. "You have called me a fraud. You have destroyed my credentials. You have tried to have me physically removed from a deal that I personally architected from the ground up. And through all of it, I have remained patient." She took one more step forward, and the space between them felt impossibly small, tight and suffocating. "Patience is now over." Isabel's voice came through the phone one last time, crisp and clear. "All parties have been notified. The press statement has been drafted and is ready for release on your command. You are clear to proceed, Arya." Arya looked at the matriarch, at her son, at the pearls glinting under the cold light of the chandelier. "Good," she said, her voice a whisper that carried across the entire silent room. "Let's end this." The ballroom held its breath. The reveal was coming, and the very air seemed to tilt toward her, as if the room itself was leaning in, desperate for a better view. Every phone, every eye followed her as she moved into the small, open space between herself and the crumbling dynasty of the Devereaux family. Her heels were steady, each click against the marble a tick of a clock counting down to their ruin. "You have spent the last 15 minutes, she began, her voice perfectly modulated to carry without a microphone, every syllable a precisely crafted weapon. "Treating me like I wandered in here by mistake. You've accused me of being a thief. You've summoned security. You've publicly destroyed my credentials in front of 200 of your peers and colleagues." Julian folded his arms across his chest, a pathetic attempt to project a confidence he no longer felt. The smirk was gone, replaced by a tight, defensive line. Eleonora's jaw was set like concrete, but her fingers were twisting the clasp of her clutch, a small, repetitive motion that betrayed her rising panic. "And the entire time," Arya continued, her gaze sweeping over them, then to the crowd, then back, "you never once had the basic decency to ask for my name?" She paused, letting that simple, damning fact settle into the silence. It was a silence filled with judgment, with dawning comprehension. Chloe Chang, her live stream now a viral phenomenon, caught the exact moment Arya's gaze sharpened from cool steel to molten fire. 100 phones shifted in unison, their red lights as steady as a firing squad taking aim. "My name," she said, her voice rising just enough to pierce the farthest corners of the cavernous ballroom, "is Aria Vance." The name finally landed, and with it came the explosion. "I am the CEO and founder of Vance Meridian. I am the architect of the very deal you were celebrating tonight. The $1.2 billion Devereaux acquisition that you've been bragging about for the last 6 months. I built it. I funded it. And 10 minutes ago, I gave it to your direct competitor." The words detonated in the silent room. Eleonora blinked rapidly, her lips parting as if to form a denial, but no sound came out. Julian's arms dropped to his sides, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. A wave of gasps, murmurs, and shocked laughter swelled from the outer ring of guests. One man near the back began to clap, a single sharp sound of approval, before others joined in, a scattered, then growing wave of applause. It was the sound of a tide turning in real time. You're lying," Julian stammered, the words weak and unconvincing. Aria simply tilted her head. "Check your phone." It was both a challenge and a sentence. He hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled the device from his pocket. His eyes flicked to the screen. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen. Eleonora fumbled for her own phone, her manicured fingers shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. Around them, a chorus of pings and buzzes confirmed the news, as every guest received the same push notification simultaneously. Breaking: Vance Meridian terminates 1.2B Devereaux merger. Sources cite breach of conduct. Orion Dynamics confirmed as new partner. Chloe Chang's camera caught the precise moment Eleonora's rigid posture finally collapsed. The pearls on her neck seemed to tighten as her shoulders slumped in defeat. Julian turned away, trying to hide his face. But there was nowhere to go. Every lens, every eye was on him. "I didn't need to raise my voice," Aria said into the sudden, shocked quiet. "I didn't need to call the press. You did all the work for me. All I had to do was let the world see you for who you truly are." The security guard took a slow, deliberate step backward, away from her, as if recognizing the vast, uncrossable chasm between duty and disaster. From the far end of the ballroom, Leo, the catering staffer who had spoken up for her, whispered to a colleague, a grin spreading across his face. "She doesn't just own the room. She owns the whole damn building." No one disagreed. The moment the push notification rippled through the gala, the atmosphere shifted from rupture to total system failure. The Devereaux were no longer just embarrassed. They were radioactive. Conversations fractured. Glasses were set down with sharp, definitive clicks. Julian's face was now a blotchy, furious red. His jaw worked silently as he muttered to his mother, "We can fix this. We can call our lawyers." "No," she snapped back under her breath, her eyes darting toward the exit as if she could simply outrun the global humiliation now unfolding on 1,000 screens per second. But there was no escape. Chloe Chang's lens was locked on her, a merciless, unblinking witness. Across the room, Leo the caterer set down his tray, his work for the night seemingly done, and simply folded his arms, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. The quartet in the corner, who had been silent since the reveal, now began packing away their instruments with a quiet finality. The party wasn't just over. It had been autopsied. A man in a navy suit, one of the Devereaux' own financial advisors, took a tentative step forward. "Aria, Ms. Vance, surely this isn't necessary. We can renegotiate. There must be a way to walk this back." Aria didn't even bother to turn and face him. Her voice was ice. "You had your chance to speak to me when you and your clients thought I was the waitress. You wasted it. The security guard, still rooted to the spot a few feet away, finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden hush. "Ma'am, Ms. Vance, my deepest apologies." His eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and respect. She gave him a brief, almost imperceptible nod. Not forgiveness, but an acknowledgement of his belated return to reason. Julian tried again, his tone now cracked with a desperate, pleading note. "Look, we didn't know. It was a mistake." "You did," Arya cut in, her voice a blade that silenced him instantly. "You saw a woman of color in a simple dress, and you made a judgment. That wasn't a mistake, it was a choice, and now you get to live with the consequences." From the side, Chloe spoke into her phone, her voice a calm, professional narration of the carnage. "And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when arrogance writes a check that reality can't cash." A ripple of grim agreement passed through the onlookers. The applause started again, stronger this time, a steady, rolling thunder that filled the high-ceilinged space. Eleonora tried one last pathetic gambit, her voice a hoarse whisper. "We can make this right. Name a price." Arya finally turned to face her fully, stepping closer, not in aggression, but with the deliberate calm of a force of nature. "Right would have been seeing a human being before you saw a servant. Right would have been treating a stranger with the basic dignity you claim to possess. Right would have been recognizing my name on the investor list and understanding that power in the 21st century doesn't always come wrapped in pearls and a pedigree. Now, all you have left is the deal you lost and the reputation you just incinerated." Silence. Complete and total silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Leo, the caterer, spoke again, his voice firmer than before, a clear, ringing note of truth. "You don't get to erase someone and then act surprised when they're the one holding the eraser." That line landed like a punch to the gut. Even the security guard nodded once, slowly. Arya straightened her shoulders. "This conversation is over, and so is your claim to my company, my capital, and my time." With that, she turned and began to walk toward the exit. The phones kept recording, the murmur of the crowd parting before her like the Red Sea. The Devereaux stood frozen in the middle of the floor, their tuxedos and pearls suddenly looking like cheap costumes for a play that had closed on opening night. And for the first time all evening, Arya Vance was the only one in the room who didn't need to say another single word. The collapse was not a single event. It was a cascade. It started with a vibration. Julian's phone buzzed incessantly, a frantic tremor against his palm. He glanced down, and his face went ashen. 7 missed calls from the Devereaux board chairman. A second later, Eleonora's clutch began to ring, her jaunty ringtone sounding like a scream of pure panic. She stared at it, unable to answer. From across the room, the navy-suited advisor's phone lit up. He turned away, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Sell it all. I don't care what the price is, just get us out." Damage control had begun, and it was already a catastrophic failure. Chloe Chang's camera tracked it all. The shifting allegiances, the frantic texts, the small telling signs of a dynasty imploding. She whispered into her mic for her viewers. This is what a corporate decapitation looks like in real time. Guests who had been fawning over the Devereaux just an hour earlier now actively avoided their gaze, turning their backs, their polite smiles vanishing as if they'd never existed. One couple, mid-conversation near the champagne tower, pivoted and joined the small, reverent crowd that was now forming around Arya, their body language a clear declaration of where their loyalty now lay. Eleonora grabbed Julian's arm, her composure shredded. "We need to get to the car," she hissed. "Not yet," he replied through gritted teeth. his eyes locked on Arya's retreating figure. But when he looked back at the room, he saw that half the investors were already on the phone with their brokers. The quartet was gone. The gala had ceased to exist. Leo, still standing his ground, leaned toward another server. "They're toxic assets now. No one wants to be seen shaking their hands." He was right. The Devereaux's inner circle had dissolved into a collection of scattered individuals, each person hunched over a phone, desperately trying to salvage their own portfolios from the wreckage. A woman in a sharp blazer, clearly a PR handler, rushed in from the hallway, her face tight with horror, holding a tablet. Julian took one look at the screen, a live feed of global news headlines, and let out a strangled curse. Across the ballroom, Arya's chief of staff, Isabel, had materialized at her side, speaking quietly with a group of high-profile guests, the executives from Orion Dynamics. Their posture was relaxed, triumphant. Papers were being signed on a tablet. Handshakes were exchanged. The message was unmistakable. "The king is dead. Long live the queen." Eleonora finally broke, her voice a sharp, ragged whisper. "She has destroyed us. In front of everyone we know." Julian didn't answer. He was staring at Chloe Chang, whose phone was still aimed directly at them, a spotlight they could not escape. Somewhere behind them, another guest muttered, just loud enough for the nearest microphones to pick it up. "They didn't get destroyed. They committed suicide." And then came the sound that cut the deepest, chairs scraping back from tables as dozens of guests rose to leave. Not just to follow Arya, but to definitively abandon the Devereaux. The ballroom was emptying around them, the vast space that had been their stage shrinking into a prison cell of their own making. The collapse wasn't coming. It was here. Arya didn't rush. Each step she took toward the grand exit was measured, allowing the Devereaux time to feel the full, crushing weight of their fall. Isabel met her halfway, a sleek tablet in hand. "All Orion contracts are executed and triple verified," she murmured, "and as per your instructions, we have officially revoked the Devereaux Group's access to the Vance Meridian Global Investor Portal. They are locked out." "Good," Arya said. "Make sure every vendor, supplier, and partner in our entire network gets the memo before sunrise." Isabel's fingers flew across the screen. "Drafting now. Do you want me to CC their legal department?" "Bury them in it," Arya replied, without a flicker of hesitation. Julian, still anchored to the spot across the ballroom, seemed to sense the finality of the conversation. His voice, now thin and reedy, cut through the fading chatter. "You can't just lock us out. We have contracts. We have agreements." Arya turned slightly, just enough for her words to carry across the space like shards of glass. "All of our agreements are built on a foundation of mutual respect. You personally voided that clause the moment you ordered me to fetch you a drink." Murmurs of approval rippled through the remaining guests. One investor whispered to another, "My God, she's freezing them out of the entire ecosystem." His tone was a mixture of sheer terror and profound admiration. Isabel's tablet pinged softly. "Done. Vendor and supplier notifications have been sent. Our IT department confirms their corporate logins have been permanently disabled." "Perfect," Arya said. "Now send the same notice to the international press. Word it as a corporate values decision. Make it explicitly clear that Vance Meridian does not partner with individuals or organizations that engage in public humiliation and bigotry." From her vantage point, Chloe Chang caught the moment Isabel hit send. It was a small, quiet tap of a finger on a screen, but it was an act of war that would have consequences for generations. Eleonora's voice finally cracked, the sound of breaking glass. This is vindictive." "No," Arya said, turning to face her fully one last time. "This is responsible leadership. My company, my investors, and my employees deserve partners who reflect our values. You have demonstrated that you do not. If you find this outcome harsh, perhaps you should spend some time considering how it felt to stand here and be told I didn't belong in the deal that I built with my own 2 hands. The matriarch's lips trembled, but she said nothing. There was nothing left to say. A server passed by with a tray of champagne, a relic from a party that was now dead. Arya stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "I'll take one of those," she said, lifting the crystal flute with quiet finality. Then she looked at the server, who happened to be Leo. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "And please, send the entire rest of the tray to the Orion Dynamics table. Tell them congratulations are in order." Across the room, the Orion executives saw the gesture and raised their glasses in a silent, grateful acknowledgement. The symbolism was brutal and absolute. The celebration had officially and permanently moved camps. Isabel leaned in one last time. "Do you want me to initiate the full portfolio review of all Devereaux subsidiary holdings? We can begin acquiring their vulnerable assets by market open." Arya's answer was immediate. "Yes. Flag anything connected to our network, then dismantle it, buy it, or shut it down. Leave nothing." Julian took an involuntary step forward, his face a mask of primal rage, but stopped short under the heavy gaze of every phone still recording. He knew, with a dawning, sickening certainty, that one more wrong move would be replayed on the internet for the rest of his life. Arya set the untouched champagne flute back on Leo's tray. "I don't need to toast to this," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "This was never a victory. It was a correction." With that, she turned and walked away. The Devereaux were left behind, frozen in their self-made ruin, locked out of more than just a party. They were locked out of the future. The conference room at Vance Meridian's global headquarters was a world away from the Starlight Plaza ballroom. It was a space of clean lines, brushed steel, and panoramic views of the Ethelberg skyline. There were no chandeliers, only the cold, clear light of a new day. Arya sat at the head of a long walnut table, with Isabel on her right, and the top executives from Orion Dynamics on her left. Across from them, a massive screen displayed the morning's market data in a sea of catastrophic red. Devereaux Group stock had opened with a 38% drop, triggering an automatic halt in trading. Jonathan Pierce, the silver-haired CEO of Orion, leaned back in his chair, a look of grudging wonder on his face. "You've already gutted their single biggest acquisition in a decade. What's next on the agenda?" Arya didn't hesitate. "We ensure they can't rebuild using someone else's capital. That means we don't just cut them off. We salt the earth." Isabel slid a tablet across the table. "This is a comprehensive list of every shared vendor, financial partner, and subcontractor between our networks and the Devereaux Group. As of 5 a.m. this morning, we have successfully offered exclusive, more lucrative contracts to over 80% of them. Devereaux isn't just losing supply lines, their entire infrastructure is defecting to us as we speak." Jonathan scanned the list, his eyebrows rising. "You're not just executing a clean break, you're performing a corporate vivisection." "I'm ensuring a permanent outcome," Arya corrected. "If they want to play in our market again, they will have to start from absolute zero. By the time they manage that, they will have neither the leverage nor the reputation to compete with a lemonade stand." A younger Orion executive tapped his screen. "The press sentiment is overwhelmingly in your favor. We can leverage this to frame our new partnership as the new industry-wide ethical standard. Zero tolerance for the kind of behavior the Devereaux displayed." "Do it," Arya commanded, "and make the message so loud and so clear that any firm even considering helping the Devereaux understands that associating with them is financial suicide." Isabel's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and allowed herself a small, rare smile. The European Investor Coalition just confirmed they are pulling an additional $250 million from all remaining Devereaux projects. Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head. In less than 12 hours, you've turned one of the oldest families in finance into a cautionary tale for business school textbooks. Aria's expression remained focused, analytical. Good. That's precisely what they chose to become. The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound the distant hum of the city. Then Aria added, "One more thing. I want our legal team to perform a hostile review of every pending trademark, patent, and licensing agreement in their pipeline. If it has any synergy with our portfolio, we buy it out from under them before they can secure it. If it doesn't, we tie it up in so much litigation that it becomes unusable for them." Jonathan's brow lifted. "That's aggressive." Aria met his gaze, her eyes like flint. "That's necessary." The plan was ruthless, surgical, and executed with the full, righteous force of the law. By the time the meeting concluded, the Devereaux Group's options had been narrowed to a single point: unconditional surrender. As the Orion team filed out, Jonathan paused at the door. "You know," he said, "most people would have been satisfied with just walking out of that ballroom with the moral victory." Aria stood, gathering her files, her movements economical and precise. "Moral victories are for people who want applause, Jonathan. I want results." And with that, she turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office. The city skyline waited beyond the glass, a sprawling kingdom of steel and ambition. A reminder that in her world, the real power moves. The ones that change the world always happen long after the cameras have been turned off. The sun was setting, painting the city in hues of gold and fire. From her corner office, Aria stood with her hands tucked into the pockets of her trousers, watching the skyline not as a view, but as a chessboard she had already won. On the polished surface of her desk, a single cream-colored envelope lay unopened. The embossed, arrogant seal of the Devereaux Group was impossible to miss. Isabel had placed it there an hour ago with a single, quiet word. Urgent. Aria made no move to open it. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what it contained. Desperate pleas for reconsideration. Hollow, self-serving apologies dressed up as diplomacy. Perhaps even a pathetic offer to buy back her favor, as if her dignity had a price tag. The real power wasn't in the letter they had sent. It was in the fact that she had made it irrelevant before it ever arrived. Behind her, a television mounted on the wall played a news segment on mute. The clips from the gala were already iconic. Headlines scrolled beneath the images. Aria Vance sets new gold standard for corporate conduct. $1.2 billion deal collapse sparks industry-wide. Reckoning on ethics. The anchor's voice, even silenced, was crisp and authoritative. The message was clear. Humiliation, whether in the boardroom or the ballroom, now carried a price far steeper than anyone had ever imagined. Aria took a slow sip of tea, the steam rising like a whisper into the still air. Outside, the city moved on, relentless. Traffic flowed like blood through arteries. Lights flickered on in a million windows. Another day was folding into night, but for the Devereaux, time had effectively stopped. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jonathan Pierce. "Vendor lockout is at 95%. Trademark acquisition is underway. They will not recover from this for at least a generation." She typed back 2 words. As planned. For a long moment she simply stood there, watching the light fade, letting the profound quiet of the office fill the space around her. She thought of the torn event pass, of Julian's sneering face, of Eleonora's command to have her thrown out. And then she thought of the way the crowd had parted for her as she walked away. How the applause had grown, not because she had demanded it, but because people, in their hearts, recognize true strength when they see it. Okay, let's wrap this up. What you just witnessed wasn't just a story about revenge. It was a masterclass in power, principle, and the quiet art of letting people destroy themselves. What is the single biggest lesson you are taking away from Aria Vance's story? Share your thoughts and your wisdom in the comments below, because your perspective is what makes this community so powerful. Aria set her teacup down and finally picked up the Devereaux's envelope. She walked it over to the industrial-grade paper shredder in the corner of her office. Without breaking eye contact with the glittering skyline, she fed it into the machine. The blades whirred to life, and the arrogant seal split into 100 useless ribbons. Isabel stepped in just as the last shred of paper disappeared. The press is asking if you'll be giving a formal statement tomorrow. Aria shook her head. No need. The statement has already been made. Isabel then held out a tablet. On the screen was an email from Leo, the young caterer. It was short, heartfelt, and eloquent. Ms. Vance, thank you. Not just for what you did, but for showing someone like me what courage looks like. It's a lesson I'll never forget. Aria took the tablet. Her fingers typed a quick reply. Leo, courage is speaking up when it's easier to stay silent. You did that last night. Let's talk about your future. My foundation has a scholarship for promising young people. It has your name on it if you want it. She handed the tablet back to Isabel. Make it happen. Outside, the last light of the day caught the highest point of the tallest building in view, the Vance Meridian Tower. It glowed against the deepening blue of the evening sky, unshakable, unmistakable, a testament to a new kind of empire. And in that moment, Aria Vance smiled, not for the victory, not for the revenge, but for the profound, unshakable certainty of it all. She had never needed their permission to be in the room. She had built the room. And now, she was rebuilding the world outside its walls, one act of quiet, constructive power at a time. Thank you for being here, for watching, and for believing in these stories. Hit that like button one last time for Justice Served Cold, and make damn sure you're subscribed with notifications on, so you don't miss the next story that absolutely needs to be told. Until next time.